Net here of GG Files. Call of Cthulhu Dark Corners of the Earth was one of the first games that got me into the survival horror genre over a decade ago now. It released way back in 2005, and the game itself was really obscure to me compared to most games at the time. The gameplay loop was seemingly made up into different varying chunks as the game progressed, and on top of that, the narrative's inspiration doesn't come from the novel The Shadow over Innsmouth directly, but actually from the tabletop RPG of the same name. This made it feel so much more proper for a video game adaptation in my mind. The flow of the game is smooth in my opinion, and I'm guessing the tabletop game has something to do with that. Apparently, the development was rushed, leading to the addition of that weird feeling too, along with a mountain of bugs, but gratefully, the plot remains succinct all the way through from start to finish.
Opened in me a new fear, a real fear, a fear of myself, what I am, and of what I've always been. All that I was is now lost. Hope, purpose, pleasure, all meaningless. I now walk in the shadows between worlds, and it is there I have finally glimpsed upon what lives in the dark corners of the earth.
The Arkham Asylum comes into view. A man is shown inside losing himself, his breathing heavy, a blood-scrawled pentagram with a strange symbol beneath his feet. He writes frantically in his notebook, a last message in his own blood to the world. He climbs onto the chair within his asylum cell. Shaking from whatever it is that burdens him, he pushes his foothold over and his body goes limp in the air. With the chair knocked over, the asylum worker notices and busts in, as the man writhes around, breathing his last breaths. This is the opening cutscene to the Dark Corners of the Earth, and our game begins 6.5 years before this, starting with the same man and the same notebook. Now he's in a town car, stepping onto a crime scene in Massachusetts in 1915. His name? Jack Walters. Jack is a detective, and he's being called into the scene of a large house with a dangerous gang inside. There are cult shooting guns, and locals say they've been seeing strange things coming from the inside at nighttime. Jack talks to some of the police on the location, and apparently there are rumors of Jack being able to solve cases with little to no evidence. But Jack says they're just that, rumors. The reason Jack got called into this scene is because of a man inside the cult. Victor Holt called for him, by name specifically. He approaches the house, and the cult starts shooting cops, killing an officer besides Jack. During the gunfire, Jack is able to sneak into the house from a side door around back. Inside, there are mysterious foreign paintings. There's a symbol in paint that looks like a flaming eye. These are designated as the save points in the game, but it serves a symbolic purpose to the narrative as well. Jack finds one of the cult members upstairs. He has tattoos all over his body carved into him, and he's talking crazy. He says, "At last, it's you," like they've all been waiting for Jack Walters to arrive. The cult member falls over from a gunshot wound. Finding more cultists, they either get shot and die, or the bodies he finds around the mansion dictate suicide. A mass ritual suicide. These people were prepared to die. They planned to die here. More searching leads to a room in the back, all littered with photos of Jack, lining the tables and the walls. They really were waiting for him to arrive. It looks like they've been after him for years, and he never knew. There's a basement leading down to a cavern with what look like hospital beds in a morgue. Past that, an open room with a large device and a bloodied man on an examination table. Alien-like tubes are stuck in his body, holding him up against a table in the wall. His body is mutilated. His organs are in containers around the ornate machine. The organs are pulsing separately from his body. He's still alive. There is a pedestal and a crystal nearby. Jack, being curious, touches the ornate stone textured device, and it lights up with just a touch. Sparks fly from the disemboweled man and the crystal nearby him. Whatever it was shocks his body as the room shakes. The organs and jars all stop moving, dictating that he's dead. Going to the next room with obscure structure, another machine waits. This time in front of a much larger device, almost reminiscent of a gate or doorway of some kind. A similar slot to the crystal upstairs lies down here empty. Jack grabs the crystal from before and places it down here. The machine starts up as Jack places it and touches the pedestal. White light flashes, and in an instant, the large piece at the back of the room burns up, showing that it was some sort of portal. Barely being able to make out the visuals of what's happening, Jack sees dark silhouettes come out from the light. Large things, beings, slow-moving, horizontal-shaped headed creatures, one by one, lurch forward from the light toward Jack. Stunned in place, Jack stands still before the scene goes black. Once again, we arrive back. February 6th, 1922. 6.5 years later pass from that event. Jack's in his office and recalls what happened to him. He says that over 6 years have gone by, but he remembers the mansion's events as just occurring 5 months ago. The doctors told him it must be from extreme stress, resulting in amnesia. During that time, he got committed to Arkham Asylum for severe schizophrenia, but Jack has no recollection of those memories. He was released because he was deemed fine and non-dangerous at some point. 5 months ago exactly, Jack says he reawakened. Feeling like he just left the mansion's events and has only been awake for the last 5 months, Jack has been diving into the occult to understand if what happened there was actually something out of the ordinary, or maybe to see if he was just delusional and it was all a part of his mental overload at the time. He's been having nightmares of inhuman structures and lands, and getting scared of his own self. Jack finishes collecting his thoughts and gets a call in his office for a new job. Somebody asks for his help on a missing persons case. A boy from a small fishing town has up and vanished. A general store manager from the town of Innsmouth, Brian Burnham. The client says he went to look at Innsmouth and got put off by the people there. He thinks the local police are lying for some reason. It's an old town and they don't like outsiders. Jack decides to take the case out of his personal interest at the details and lacking work otherwise. One single bus goes all the way out to the small fishing town, and tomorrow morning he'll be on it. The next day comes right away. Now on the creaky bus, its interior made of waterlogged wood and rusty poles, drives straight into town. The bus driver states that they try their best to ward off visitors and don't like when people interfere with the town, giving a passive nod to Jack that he's not welcome there. He also infers that Innsmouth is as self-contained as possible, with little to no help from outside areas. The bus comes to a halt right in front of the Innsmouth Hotel in the dark of night. Jack Walters steps off, making his first entrance into the smog-ridden port. He walks in the hotel and greets the manager, Charlie Gilman. He's not much of a conversationalist and doesn't convey if any rooms are available at the moment. With nothing to do for the night, Jack starts making his rounds about the town. Looking around, the whole place is grimy and dirty. The brick buildings are clearly decades upon decades old and barely upkept. There's gotta be a plethora of abandoned buildings even in the town square. Most of the locals look decrepit and off-putting, even the younger ones, although most look of an older age. Asking around about the case, he makes his way to the First National grocery store, with very minimal help from the villagers. It's the store where the missing person Brian Burnham worked. The First National grocery store has been broken into as of recent, and a local policeman bars the way inside. But the store is one of the only leads to go on, given that it's the only place Brian is connected to. Jack has to get in. Looking around the town a bit more, there's nothing really of substance beyond more rotted buildings and overly brash people lining the cold cobblestone streets. Continuing on the stone path passing old businesses, there's a sound in the distance. Somebody is singing out loud, if you can even call that singing. It's coming from an alleyway. Moving towards it brings us to a bar. Directly outside of the clearly past closed bar is the drunken mess, Zadok Allen. Before Jack is even able to get a word out, Zadok instantly asks him for some money. Jack doesn't heed him at all and presses for any information about Burnham. Zadok says he's probably killed already and mentions something called the Order of Dagon, but he won't speak anymore until he gets some alcohol. If Jack won't give him money, he'll just get his alcohol through information bribery. Leaving Zadok to find that alcohol, another person walks into our path a little further up a side road. It's a girl, a very well-dressed woman, in fact. She has jet black hair, wearing furs over a black winter jacket. She doesn't look like the rest of the people here. She's clean and, well, normal looking. Jack asks for her name, but she gives him the cold shoulder and tells him to leave the port, tonight. It didn't sound like a suggestion, much more of a serious declaration. She seems more friendly in contrast to everyone he's talked to so far, but still no information is learned from the encounter. Coming back to the First National grocery store, the cop seems to have left. We enter the alley behind the store and see him. He must be making his rounds. Since there's no way anyone will help him with the investigation here, there's only one thing to do. Break and enter the building to find out what's going on. Sneaking past the guard and into the back door of the grocery store, Jack enters a pretty mundane looking shop. Nothing too out of the ordinary necessarily for a recent break-in. The break-in must have happened straight through the front door. It has scratch marks on it and broken glass. In the back office, papers indicate the store had been doing fairly well under Brian's management. He also apparently had a bottle of whiskey stowed away back here. Looks like Zadok will be pleased. After the snooping around is just about finished, bangs come from the door in the back. It must be the constable. He knows someone's in here. Jack looks around for anywhere to go or hide, but no luck. The doors are locked shut from the inside. There's a hatch in the ground though. He makes his way in using a ladder, but before he can properly grab on, the old wooden ladder crumbles, stranding him in a cellar. The policeman oversees this and closes the hatch on him. The Innsmouth folk have no care for outsiders' life. It looked like a good chance to get rid of Jack, and he took it without a second thought. Inside the cellar are more documents that give some information on the religious group from the beginning of the game. They're called the Fellowship of Yith, and they were found around 33 years prior to the current time when the leader, Victor Holt, received a revelation from beyond this realm, supposedly. The house that they inhabit in Boston has odd multicolored lights bellowing out from it throughout the day, along with strange chanting. This so-called prophet is the same one who called Jack to the house that day. Another journal is found, the Diary of Brian Burnham. A small entry but a helpful lead. Brian supposedly has a girlfriend, and they were supposed to make their way to New York City after they scored some money from the store. Brian also notes how weird it is that there's close to no other businesses open in Innsmouth. It's a dead town, but not a ghost town. Jack is able to break through a flimsy ancient brick wall and out of the cellar. It leads under and into a resident's home. Nobody seems to be home from the noise. Poking around a bit, Jack opens a door to one of the rooms of the house. Turning with horror, a woman hangs from one of the rafters. Jack repulses at the sight of the drained corpse. Her body is completely still. It's a seemingly barren home. She seems to have died a very long time ago. Was there significance to the suicide, or is this normal for this place? The only thing of interest is several notes and papers around the house with the date 1846. But that's near a century ago now. One of the doors ends up leading back to the musty town, thankfully. But before that, a man walks into view. Lucas Mackey. He looks like a corporate outsider in a suit. He says he's an inspector for the government and wanted to check in on Jack. He tells that the government has a special interest in Innsmouth and the Marsh family. Mackey notes the missing Burnham kid and that he didn't seem like a crook. This man clearly knows more about this town than he leads on. They have a semi-friendly chat and Mackey departs for now. We make our way back around the cobweb-crammed alleys to Zadok Allen. It was a bumpy road, but the bourbon has been retrieved. Right on sight, Zadok snatches it from Jack's hand and takes a huge gulp. He finally starts spilling what we wanted to hear. Well, loose information, not exactly what we wanted to hear. He begins with the fact that Captain Obed is the one who started everything. Something about messing with the gods out at Devil's Reef. He became religious towards something unhuman and unchristian. Some townsmen who had a problem with it followed Captain Obed's group to the reef and fought against them, leading to Obed's imprisonment by the next morning. Zadok claims a certain night in 1864, they came. One night they came from the reef and slaughtered their way to the jailhouse, freeing Obed and clearing the streets. a bloodbath. Captain Obed took control of the town from then on and stopped allowing outsiders in. This is clearly the rambling of a drunkard, but the date of 1846 does at least line up with the notes in the dead resident's home from before. The night may have gave Obed power, he continues, but it also made him in debt to the gods he worshipped. So Obed made the townsfolk take the oaths of Dagon. Zadok is about blacked out for the night. He rambles that if we want to know more about what the oaths are, we must find Thomas Waite near the poorhouse. Thomas Waite is also the owner of the grocery store Burnham managed. Squeezing a little bit more out of him, Zadok says Obed learned of the gods from a tribe in his travels. The tribe worshipped these sea gods with human sacrifice and got gold and fishing traction in return. Bounty for death. Obed followed their ways and created the esoteric Order of Dagon. He would chant incantations at the reef outside the port at nighttime, and the town would supposedly be blessed in return. The hierarchy of power was maintained with the Order of Dagon and how Obed used it on the town. Zadok passes out mid-speech on a staircase outside the brewery, sleeping like a baby. That was a large info dump, and obviously, Jack doesn't buy into it, especially coming from the alley cat that is Zadok Allen. Although the dates and tragedy do seem at least prevalent to look into more. Something must have happened to this town. A major change at some turning point in the town's shoddy history is more than believable. Leaving Zadok to his beauty rest, the same rich-looking woman approaches us. This time, she does in fact introduce herself, Rebecca Lawrence. She tells Jack he could go missing next and that we should follow her. She does seem like she is genuinely looking out for him. In a corner of the alley, her eyes dart anxiously as she tells us that we have no business here once again. Innsmouth is far past strange and he's not safe staying here. This is the second warning she has given us. She also adds in another important detail about Burnham. She exclaims to not know about what happened to him, but if we need to find him to leave, his girlfriend, Ruth, would have the answers. Once again, a small lead gives a new tier of hope for the case. Rebecca thinks it's unsafe to be seen together with us and takes her leave for the well-being of them both. None of these things bother Jack. He's still able to play it off cool, no matter how foreign this town may present itself as. He's been through much stranger things and has seen his fair share of darkness. If anything, it seems Jack is only more interested now. With a lot of ground to cover, he makes his way back to Town Square. It's darker now than when he arrived. It must be well beyond bedtime. While walking towards the square, a scene plays of someone or something watching Jack's movement from the rooftops. A low, grumbling, guttural noise accompanies the being. Looking around the rusted buildings, however, there's nothing to be seen after the visual ends. Jack sneaks into the poorhouse in the square. He overhears a villager being coarse with somebody about not talking to the outsider no matter what, and that if she does, he'll report her to the Order. She cowers in fear and agrees to comply. On actually trying to speak to her once he leaves, she does truly only respond with, "I can't be seen talking to you." The tyrannical rule on the citizens we've been hearing about is clear. Advancing through crate-littered, dark side buildings and rough planked hallways, Jack makes it to the Waite house Zadok spoke of. He knocks and is welcomed by a small girl. He asks if her parents are home. She says Daddy's at work and Mommy's upstairs. She's been bad, whatever that means. Her name is Ramona. Jack asks to speak to her mother, but Ramona says no, Mommy bites, and that she needs to stay upstairs for her own good. She continues that her mommy growls when she approaches her door. Jack presses that he needs to speak to her father, and Ramona invites him in to wait for him. She goes off to play. Nothing of real priority is found inside the seemingly pleasant home but a family portrait. It's just Thomas Waite and Ramona, with a third of the photo having been ripped out. There was another person in the frame. On the second floor, there is a bolted door. Out of curiosity and having the time on his hands, Jack unbolts it and checks it out. It leads to a set of stairs to the attic. Another door is up here. This one with a slat to see what's inside without needing to open it. Jack, of course, pulls it back and looks inside the crusty wooden attic. A silence for a moment of time. A demonic roar echoes upward towards Jack. A fleshy, bluish beast is seen out of the corner of the eye for a split second. Jack gets knocked back in surprise and looks at the door lock. It rambles as the thing hits itself against the door, and again, then once more, this time throwing the door wide open and bringing Jack lumbering to the ground from the blow. Whatever that thing was just sprinted downstairs, its low-toned yell coming from the stairs below, and another scream with it. The scream of a little girl, Ramona. The sound of an impact follows and another right after, the next impact sounding much more akin to gushing. Jack, still stunned, his mind is in a haze from the shock. His perspective bounces back from the house into a vision of the asylum. He's in the corner, shaking in a maddened craze on the dirty tiled floor. He's hiding behind his psych ward bed. It seems like he's cradling himself and rocking in fear. The vision flashes in and out. Jack regains his composure back in reality. Getting up from the ground, still in the attic, he hears moaning and sobbing coming from downstairs. Jack starts running down the steps out of the attic and into the darkest view he's seen so far. Ramona is lying on the carpet in front of the main door. Her face is nearly scratched clean off with slashes following down her body. Her dress is ripped to shreds and covered in wet dirt and blood. The little girl has been completely eviscerated by the monster that lived in the attic. Her own mother. That beast that dwelled within this house has broken free. Thomas Waite, her father, is cradling her in his arms and crying without letting himself catch a single breath. He's rocking her bloodied corpse back and forth in agony. Thomas turns to Jack as he descends on the scene. Jack is taken aback at the horror and can't mouth anything but an apology. Thomas says, without responding, that Brian Burnham was taken and he wants us to take his key to a safe in his store. He says the Order wants whatever's inside. He doesn't have time to chat. They're coming right now. Thomas reaches out and hands Jack the key with the other arm that's not holding Ramona, and sure enough, the constable busts through the door at the same moment. He blames Thomas Waite for his own daughter's murder and takes him away out of his own house. The constable picks up the daughter's corpse like a sack over his shoulder and leaves Jack alone in the broken family's home. But this place will never be stepped foot into again by any of the Waites. This tragedy, witnessed by Jack, is a brutal lesson into Innsmouth's culture of sweeping anything they need to under the rug to fulfill their goals. The Order of Dagon? What could they want in the safe? Outside the house, underneath a shabby-looking walkway, waits Rebecca. Rebecca comments on Thomas taking the fall, and that the Order will kill him for it. She gives some directions to the store that Jack needs to get to and leaves. She seems like she's actively trying to watch and look out for him every step of the way. Not for malicious reason, it seems like genuine worry for Jack. He makes it inside the store and to the safe very quickly after the encounter. A woman jumps a mile as the detective walks in the empty building. She's standing in front of the safe. The girl is Ruth Billingham. It's Brian's girlfriend. She tries to lie to Jack out of paranoia for who he might be. He tells her that Brian could be killed by the Order and tells her that he's not from here. That seems to ease her mind, and she decides to put her trust in him to find Brian since he's an outsider. Ruth asks Jack to save him and gives him a photo. She'll wait at the cannery near the outskirts of town until they come to get her. Inside the safe, there is a book. It's transcribed, the Book of Dagon. It gives off a mysterious and creepy atmosphere. Not much is intelligible inside, but it looks like a way to decode an ancient language. It makes sense that the Order of Dagon would want the Book of Dagon. Now that he has the item, the night is deep and quiet. Whatever progress Jack has made for the day will have to come to an end here. Sneaking back to the city street in the town square, he gives the hotel another visit. This time, Charlie Gilman does offer a room on the top floor. Jack continues to have visions of other points of view around the town. He feels like he's going crazy, and Charlie comments that he's looking pale. Hopefully a good night's sleep will lull this over. Charlie gets held up by an officer for a moment, so with nothing else to do but wait, Jack breaks into the back office and snoops around. Body parts are scattered around the back office, in filing bins, on the desk, all around. Were they getting rid of a body in here? Were they hiding it, or were these here for an ulterior reason? Doesn't matter. Jack's semi-used to the insanity of this place by now, but this is not an easily digestible sight. Charlie returns to the lobby, thankfully not seeing him pop out from the office. He takes Jack up to his hotel room, and with little talk between them, Jack locks the door behind him and gets a sense of his own privacy for once. Nothing to do but go to bed after everything that's happened. Hopefully he'll leave this place with Brian in tow tomorrow. The nightmares come. A voice calls to him, ancient and ephemeral. It says the city of Nikotis and asks him where he wants to go. It doesn't seem human, but the scene is essentially black as Jack is mostly unconscious. The being says he will understand soon. This nightmare is also followed by more premonitions of the hotel lobby. Multiple people surround Charlie. They're talking of taking Jack out tonight. They're advancing toward the room. Jack wakes up after seeing the vision. Good thing he locked the door, but why could he see them plotting in real time? No time to think, he's got to run. A connecting door in his hotel room allows Jack to make his way next door and into another guest space. They're breaking down his door and yelling. They know he's running. They're coming quick and not making it a secret. Jack shuts door after door, blocking them with dressers or whatever he can grab. Jack keeps making his way through connecting doors as they bash down the ones behind him. He sees a shattered window in an end room. He unblocks it, and without hesitation, climbs out onto the railing. Gunshots follow from behind him. They really are trying to kill him, and they don't care who knows. Underneath him, in the streets, more townsfolk look for him. It's not just them. Large groups are hunting the outsider. Jack makes his way from building rooftop to rooftop, finding only seconds of solace between gunshots. He sneaks slowly once getting away from the hotspot. More visions plague his mind as this is going on, but it actually helps. He's seeing the Innsmouth villagers' point of view and seeing the routes they're taking trying to capture him. They're screaming for the Order of Dagon, rambling like lunatics. This isn't just a couple groups, the entire town is involved in this case. Jack has a dead mark on his back now. Nobody will let him get out of this town any longer. The rain patters down hard outside as he makes his way through old warehouses. Inside a large abandoned wooden water tower, a citizen falls from some rafters and dies from the landing in front of Jack. The Order is up to something large tonight. Jack isn't the only loose end. There is way too much commotion for one outsider. A citizen from up above on a higher floor of the tower hollers down towards his dead friend, but doesn't seem to be distraught. He gives Jack some advice that the Innsmouth people don't like the sewers, and he'd have a better chance at evading them if he took that path. He says that they're unsafe, however. It seems that not every inhabitant is crazed and out for blood. There are more like Rebecca here. Jack does what the man recommends and makes his way down to the sewers after a bloody shootout with some villagers. He does take some damage, but nothing that will incapacitate him. The man was right, nobody followed him down here. The sewers are dank and covered in green mold. Rusted bars and barely lit grimy paths. These haven't been used in ages. Jack hears something ahead, whispering and crying. His head hurts from the noise. Getting closer through a rusty gate, he sees a little girl crouching beside a wall in the distance. She instantly runs out of frame. Was that Ramona? No, it can't be. He watched her father grip her mutilated corpse. That was the reality. She was dead. He shakes it off and keeps marching onward for a while through slimy tunnels and pipes. After a bit of searching, he comes to an open area through an old red pipe. This area is contained and full of skeletons. Tons of them, people long dead. In the middle of the space, on top of a grating, is the body of the drunk, Zadok Allen. Somebody must have thrown him down here from up above. Or maybe they killed him beforehand. He knew too much about the Order and was alive too long. When Jack recoils from the side of the person he once knew, his mind shudders and brings him back to the asylum again. Flies buzz everywhere around his small cell. He's still cradled in the corner, shaking in this vision. Why was he having these visions? Are these visions or are these memories? Is he regaining what he lost? Just in small spots? Whatever they could mean, he can't focus on it right now. When he snaps back to reality, he continues up his path and to a ladder to the streets above. Tons more villagers parole the streets looking for him. He needs to be careful and silent or else he could die with a single misstep. In a random building resembling a larger rich house, he finds a study with a fireplace, safe from the danger outside to rest for a bit. Rebecca is standing in here over the mantel, surprised to see him, and also relieved that he wasn't dead. Rebecca has the information that he's been waiting for. Brian is inside the jailhouse. He never made it out of town. Apparently, the Order was saving him for sacrifice to their god, Dagon. Jack calls her crazy, even after everything he's seen, telling her that the town has corrupted her mind. She doesn't give him an inch back. She confides in Jack and tells him that her father didn't pledge himself to the fish god, and they killed him for the blasphemy. She says there is a crypt underneath the town church that will bring them safety and help them get out of town. Whatever's happening tonight, it's too dangerous. They need to procure the Burnham boy and go. Rebecca agrees to bring Jack to the crypt. Before they begin, shots barrel through the windows of the study. They found them. Rebecca takes the initiative and tells Jack to follow her to the church. She sprints out of the room and away from the windows. He follows directly behind her. To get there, they need to make their way outside and take their chances from crossing gunfire. The church is right nearby. Rebecca makes her way there first and starts unlocking the steeple doors. Right as they click open and Jack catches up, a stray bullet pierces Rebecca and she falls to the ground. It didn't look like she even had time to bleed out. One last cry is heard from her before a near instant death. Jack doesn't have time as he watches the person who's helped him all this time die right in front of him. He runs in and barricades himself inside the monastery. His heart is pounding, but darkness is encroaching on the church. He feels a draft coming from the back near the altar. He finds the cellar door Rebecca spoke of, leading to the crypt. Inside Rebecca's father's crypt, he finds articles of missing persons and Innsmouth citizens that have wound up dead. Her dad must have been trying to put an end to whatever madness started plaguing this town. The year of 1846 is highlighted in these notes once again. A new vision plagues Jack's mind. It's similar to the first one he had when he arrived here. It's that guttural voice he heard, or at least one that sounds like it. It's barely human. It shows more people outside looking for him. The thing is one of them. Popping out the other side of the crypt, Jack runs into Mackie again. Mackie gives a bit more info since he's also in danger as the other outsider of the town. He reveals he is a government agent, not just an inspector. He tells Jack to calm down. One single detective is turning Innsmouth inside out all for one kid. He's getting in the way of the government's interest in this place. As much as Mackie thinks it's ridiculous to save one kid at the cost of his own life, he does help Jack locate the jailhouse, keeping Brian Burnham. Finally, Jack finds the jailhouse. He hears an inmate whispering about Cthulhu's Tagen. He sleeps in the city of Relay. He can hear them, he states. He just keeps repeating over and over. Is he from the cults in Boston? He's beyond mad at this point. In the cell next to him is a younger-looking boy squatted against the cell wall. Jack greets him. It's Brian Burnham. He looks roughed up a bit, and when Jack tries to talk to him, Brian doesn't trust him. He says the order doesn't show mercy, and after what he's been through in this town, who could blame him? Jack remembers the photo that Ruth gave him. He hands it to Brian through the bars, and Brian sinks in dismay. It worked. The boy clearly loves Ruth. He switches his tone right away, and says that if she trusts him, he will too. He asks Jack to help get him out of here. Looking around, Jack finds some cell keys and a gun in the police station. We're finally equipped to do more than just sneaking. Breaking Brian out of his containment, he tells Jack of an old automobile on Main Street they can use to drive out of town. There's so many townsfolk patrolling the street, it'd take a lot more than one gun to blast through. Their escape is so close in sight now. Jack has finally met and retrieved Brian Burnham. The case he was sent here on has devolved into something much larger and cryptic, but that's not for him to find out anymore. They need to make their way to this car. They decide to use the sewer system nearby the prison to be safe. A couple shots are fired on the way, but they make it there in one piece. Wailing is heard in the dripping caverns of the system. It's a small path of unease, but they make it to a wooden small shack of a building that houses the car Brian spoke of. Next to it is Mackie again, who was waiting for them. He spills this time. He's an agent of the U.S. Treasury Department working with the FBI. They've been investigating Innsmouth, the way the citizens look, the disease. It's unnatural and widespread. They want to know what it is and stop it from becoming mainstream. Mackie aids Jack and Brian with escaping, but before that, Brian asks Jack to grab Ruth's brooch from the police station. He seems to have forgot it. A weird request to make right now, but Jack complies and backtracks to the safe in the station and grabs the brooch inside. There's also something he missed in here, a diary in one of the cells. It's the ship log of Captain Obed Marsh. It chronicles an island he found, not marked on maps, and the tribe he met there. Ruins of inhuman structure were found here. This was the remains of a city of sea gods the tribe worshipped. Their prayer gave them bounty and gold in return. By means of ritual and chants, the sea gods could be summoned along with their gifts. Captain Obed tried this practice out once he made it back to Innsmouth. He boated out to Devil's Reef outside the town port where these ruins were said to lie and began his rituals. He claims to have spoken to the sea gods that night and confirmed they were real. They gave him gold. This will be the rise of Innsmouth, he says. Obed Marsh brought this information back to the town in the year 1846, and naturally he was written off as mad. He was thrown in a cell to rot by the religious people of the town, along with any followers he had accumulated. That night, they came from the reef. They slaughtered their way to the jailhouse and ripped Obed from his cell. The offerings that Obed would bring them would not be denied. A bloodbath ran through the town that night. They came to know that the sea gods were very real. Obed used this to take control of the town and the Marsh family. He started running things, creating the Order of Dagon from then on. He says in his diary that he doesn't mind being seen as a tyrant and sacrificing people if it means he can avert the greater threat that is the sea god's wrath. A large history lesson, but it doesn't seem to faze Jack as it's too far-fetched. It's a story that this man Obed Marsh must have wrote during the boredom of his confinement here. It may line up with Zadok's story of the events of 1846. Something did indeed happen during that year, but there has to be an explanation for it. There just has to be. This diary is the ravings of someone who is clearly unwell. Returning to the car and handing the brooch to Brian, he's got the engine running now. They're ready to ride through this town. It's not going to be smooth though. Outside the gated doors are streets of armed guards lying in wait, but they have no choice. Brian drives and Jack sits in the back of the truck bed. Brian hits the gas and bursts through the doors of the shed. Shots fly from every street corner they pass. Some miss entirely, and some do graze them. The shoddy car is barely able to drive as Brian hits road bumps, nearly turning the vehicle over multiple times. Jack returns some shots, but to no avail. It's too chaotic of a ride to hit. On the outskirts of town, the villagers continue running after the car. They're screaming to not let the outsiders escape. Brian makes a couple last corners, and they stop in the confines of the cannery Ruth was supposed to have waited for them at. They are at the edge of the town now. This is the last task before they're home free. Jack gets out to find Ruth while Brian stows the vehicle in hiding and keeps the engine running. Jack strides into the cannery slowly, and what he sees appalls him. Although not able to get a very good look, there are guards in here, everywhere. Some are barely human. They look scaly and damp. Their bodies overly large and webbed. They don't resemble people anymore. The curse of Innsmouth has near fully overtaken the poor souls. They're fishmen. He keeps crouching and moving step by step behind as many as he can. Some find him, which forces him to take them out with his gun. Jack eventually makes it to a warehouse at the back of the cannery. He finds Ruth, scared, waiting up in the rafters. She's alive. He makes his way up to where she is and gets her out of this nightmare of a facility. They make their way down out of the building around the back. Brian's waiting in the car, and they make their last gambit. The bridge leading out of town is right in sight, but a heavy bullet intercepts the chase. It goes straight through Brian, and he topples over along with the wheel of the vehicle. The tires fly to the side and bash a wall right before the bridge. The car topples over with Ruth and Brian still inside. Jack flies through the windshield and hits the stone street. He looks toward the car. It explodes, with both of the people he just saved still inside. His eyes shut. Everything goes dark. Jaunty old-timey music is being played over the sound of squeaking wheels. Jack comes in and out of consciousness as he sees a man in a white lab coat over him. He fully awakens to a federal agent berating him. He wants to know what Jack's business was in Innsmouth. Jack plays back with some sassy commentary, barely recollecting what just happened. The agent slaps Jack for his tone. Jack keeps up the facade. The agent asks the doctor for some help, and the man in the lab coat walks over silently with prongs and electrocutes Jack. They want the information no matter the means. Jack tells them the truth about the missing persons case and the town's hostility towards outsiders. He also hears Ramona's voice as his mind fades back and forth. It passes though. The FBI agent grills him for playing the hero and trying to save the boy, just like Mackie did. The agent tells Jack that Innsmouth is guilty of widespread criminal activity, and they're looking for any evidence to be able to move through with a full raid on the town. Jack and the agent continue with playful banter, forcing the doctor to electrocute him once again. The agent threatens Jack to play along, or else he'll have him arranged to be convicted. They want Jack to join the spearhead on the raid. as in, he'll need to go back to the town to see the rest of this nightmare through. To find out for fact what lies beneath the surface of Innsmouth, he'll need to see it again. They're going to attack the Marsh refinery come morning, and whether he wants to or not, Jack's coming along. So this ends part 1 of 2 of my summary story of the Dark Corners of the Earth. This game is very much divided into 2 phases in my mind, and that was the end of the first phase. I also consider the escape from Innsmouth to be much more lore and character heavy, so the next video shouldn't take too long to finish the story off. I love the narrative of this game and the inspiration they took from the novel. The town was done absolutely perfectly. I would talk more about it, but I'd rather save that for a full video if I do end up making one. Thanks for watching all the way through if you did. This is a part of a series where I summarize indie or retro horror game plots. If that's your thing, feel free to check my other story videos out. GG Files is comprised of 2 people, and I cover the indie horror side, and my channel partner covers the action indie side. We have a lot of different content, but it's all indie games for the most part. Subscribe and like and all that for more. Thanks again. Goodbye.